So the first 12 chapters of the Gospel of Matthew basically show us how that Jesus Christ came and offered the kingdom to Israel and was rejected. By the 10th, the 11th, and 12th chapters in Matthew, Jesus' messengers were rejected, his forerunner was rejected in chapter 11, and the king himself was rejected in chapter 12. The next division in the book of Matthew is chapter 13, and Matthew alone, of all the gospel writers, records for us 7 or 8 parables that describe the nature of Christ's in-between kingdom now, if you want to call it that. His inter-advent kingdom between the offer of the kingdom to Israel at the first advent and when he actually does come and establish his kingdom at the second advent. Right? Call it Christ's inter-advent kingdom, or now that the Jewish kingdom is rejected, he offers the kingdom, and he describes the kingdom to his disciples. And what's really fascinating is that we live in the time period that was predicted and described in these parables. This is describing our world today in Matthew chapter 13 and on into the future. Let's just read the first few verses of Matthew chapter 13 together, and we'll skip down a little bit later into the chapter just to set the background to this chapter. The same day, that is the same day that Jesus had these head-to-head confrontations with the Pharisees, the same day he went out of the house and sat by the seaside. What sea do you think that is? Probably the Sea of Galilee. And great multitudes were gathered to him, so that he went into a ship and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore, and he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, and we have the first parable given. The end of the first parable is described in verse 9. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. The disciples came and said unto him, Why do you speak to the people in parables? He answered and said unto them, Because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. Whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away even what he has. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand, and in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which says, By hearing you shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing you shall see, and shall not perceive. For this people's heart is waxed gross, their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you, that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which you see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which you hear, and have not heard them. And he proceeded to give them the meaning of the first parable in private. Okay, now what are the two classes of people that Jesus is talking to here? Okay, the non-believers and the believers. Who are the believers specifically here? Yeah, the core group, right? The followers that he'd had for some time. Who were the non-believers? The Pharisees. Undoubtedly, there were Pharisees there. They're not highlighted or singled out here like they were in chapter 12. Just the people, the masses, right? It says great multitudes, verse 2, came. So it was all the people there. Now, I want you to see something here. The stuff in this chapter comes immediately on the background of chapters 10, 11, and 12, right? Where Jesus has received intense opposition, right? He sent his messengers. He sent these 12 men out with the gospel of the kingdom. And he said, just go to the Jewish people, right? But I can tell you right now, he says, before I send you, how you're going to be accepted or what response you're going to get. He says they're not going to receive you. It's going to divide. Some yes, most no. And so they had come back. Apparently, between the sending them out in chapter 10 and this time, that had happened. Jesus had sent them out, and his messengers and his message were rejected. John the Baptist, chapter 11, had been put to death, or was about to have been put to death. He was in prison anyway, right? The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, chapter 11, Jesus said. Right? The king's forerunner is already being violently opposed. And then the king turns around himself and he says, and you people are rejecting me. See? And he pronounced woes on what towns of Galilee in chapter 11? Capernaum and Chorazin. And I think he mentions Bethsaida. Maybe not. But were not these three towns right on the shore of the Sea of Galilee? And he says, you people have rejected. And in chapter 12, it came to kind of a head because we have 5 episodes in the 12th chapter of Matthew that describe the Pharisees' opposition to Jesus. And the Pharisees were the purists. They were the ones that everybody kind of looked to in the country, to get their religious signals from. They were to Jewish society what the media is to our society. Right? What the media says goes, basically. That's what do people really believe today? They believe what they watch on television. Right? Isn't that where we get our social morality today, basically from Hollywood? I think so. It's not the church anymore. Right? It's something else. And so what Jesus was doing here is he was now addressing the masses of the people, and he was now beginning to hide things from the people because the people's leaders had opposed him. The people had been hearing all this stuff, but the people were still confused and divided, right? And so Jesus was purposely, if you wish, giving a selective message. He was speaking double talk, if you wish. He was preaching, but he had no intention now of giving a message that was easily understood by everybody. Now he was explaining stuff that was going to be understood only by believers. That was really going to be understood only by believers. We have here in action a principle. We have a principle illustrated in Jesus' actions here that is true and it's ongoing today. There are people preaching the gospel on television today. There are people doing personal evangelism door to door today, like believers. We're talking about Christians, right? The gospel is being produced in literature all over the place in this country, right? Our country is a little bit like Israel was right here in Matthew chapter 13. They'd had their heyday. They'd had their opportunity, right? The message had gone forth abundantly, and the society had essentially turned its back on it except for just a few. Much like our society today. And the principle that operates today is that God just doesn't give everybody understanding. He gives some. He gives the elect. He gives the limited, hand-picked few an understanding. kind of a sobering thing to realize that you can preach the gospel to your blue in the face to your neighbors, and they just won't get it. They don't want it. They got all their barriers up. We're getting ready to do the Jesus Video Survey Project. Right? We've collected all but $800 worth necessary to put this thing on, and we're ordering materials. Are coming in next week, some of them, and we're geared up for it. And we know that only 1 in 5 houses is going to even be interested, or 1 in 17 houses is interested, and you can get a free video of the life of Jesus. Okay? Remember what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, the Sermon on the Mount, and the principles. He said, broad is the way that leads to destruction, right? And narrow is the way to life. Few there be that find it. In terms of numbers, the majority is doomed. We could preach and preach and preach on this, right? But I just want you to see that the whole setting for the mysteries of the kingdom stuff found in this chapter is that it's given to people like you people, right? It's not for them, it's for you. And that's why it was given in parabolic form. So that the people that really had spiritual sensitivities would wake up and get the lesson out of the story. They'd get the idea. And that lost people would just shake their head at it and walk away. That's right. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, the natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God because they're first in him. Right? So that's what we have here. Okay? That little phrase in verse 11 is probably the theme, is the key verse to the chapter. That's probably the key verse. It is given to you, my disciples, to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. What is a mystery? The way he thinks is a mystery. No.
Who's that?
You.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
The way that things work that you do not yet understand.
Okay. Something that's not understood. Everybody would get that much, right? A mystery is just something I don't understand, right? But specifically it relates to divine revelation. In the Bible, what God knows, we don't understand fully. There are things that we don't understand because God hasn't shown them to us yet. See? That's what a mystery is. Okay? The common thread of the 8 parables in this chapter is that they all relate to the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. Mark says that Jesus said, "Unto you it's given to you to know the mystery," singular. And if you read through Mark chapter 4, he gives 2 of these of the parable. He only gives 2 of them. That Matthew records 8. Right? If you go to Luke chapter 8, Luke says that Jesus said, "It's given to you, disciples, to know the mysteries." But in his chapter, Luke only records 1 of the parables. Right? And so if you want to know what the mysteries of the kingdom are, you don't go to Mark and you don't go to Luke, you come to Matthew. Because Matthew gives us 8 parables. 8 different parables describing the mysteries. This is one of the 4 greatest public messages, or maybe not public, but one of the 4 greatest discourses of Christ. Right? It's a good thing to tuck this away as an important little fact in your brain. Right? The Sermon on the Mount is considered to be one of the greatest of Jesus' discourses. Right? The mysteries of the kingdom is the second of the great discourses that Jesus gave, because in Matthew 13, this is material that's unique in the Bible, or even in the Gospels. The third great discourse that Jesus gave is known as the Olivet Discourse in chapters 24 and 25 when he was speaking to his disciples about the destruction of Jerusalem in the future to follow. Great prophetic themes revealed there. And the fourth of the great discourses of Christ is the upper room discourse that only John records in John chapters 13 through 16. What's the first of the four great discourses of Christ?
Sermon on the Mount.
Sermon on the Mount. What's the second? Mysteries of the Kingdom. What's the third? Answer one of them. You was in La La Land the whole time. The Olivet Discourse. What was the fourth one? I can't make him do it. He refuses. He's stubborn. Rebellion is the sin of witchcraft. Mr. Radford. Sleeping? Thou shalt not sleep. It's the 11th commandment.
The second one was the Mysteries Discourse. There was other words about this mystery.
Mysteries of the Kingdom. Yeah. Right. I think it would be great if you could remember that the main teachings of Jesus are embodied in those four discourses. The principles of the kingdom in the Sermon on the Mount. The mysteries of the kingdom in Matthew chapter 13 by the seashore. Right? The Olivet Discourse, the future of the kingdom, if you wish. Right? In Matthew chapter 24 and 25, and the Upper Room Discourse, you have a lot of stuff that gives us the inside, the inner view of this same period of time as described here in Matthew 13. So of those four great discourses, the Upper Room Discourse and Matthew 13 go very close together. They really fit well, because both of those talk about church age realities ending in tribulation. Okay? The Sermon on the Mount and the Olivet Discourse go together because you have the spiritual principles of the kingdom that then are outworked on earth. See? As revealed in the Olivet. They're actually put into practice. The spiritual principles in the Sermon on the Mount are actually implemented during the time described in the Olivet Discourse, the kingdom on earth. Does that make sense to you? Oh boy. Yeah, we would really have we would have enough to get saved, but we would know nothing almost of the plan and the program of God were it not for these four major discourses. So this is the second of the four, and so it's just a really important section of the New Testament.
The Upper Room Discourse.
The Upper Room Discourse parallels Matthew 13. It goes along with Matthew 13, describing the church age.
Okay, church age.
Yeah. Ending in tribulation. Now I just want to give you Vine's definition of mystery because it's kind of a key thing here. Vine says that a mystery is that which is known to the initiated. Right? A mystery is something that only the initiated know. Only the privileged few know the mystery. Okay.
That's secular from the nations and Islamic.
Yeah, that's right. That's a perverted religious parallel of the same principle that Jesus was doing here. Remember the Apostle Paul? To me is given the mystery of the church. Paul was given the mystery of the church. Jew and Gentile in one body. Did you know that none of the other apostles was given that revelation? Only Paul was privileged to see that inside information of Jews and Gentiles being united in one body, breaking down of the differences between them and be united. Only Paul was given the mystery of the rapture, the translation of the saints. Peter, John, Jude, they weren't given that. They were sometimes they were given some details, but they were not given the full revelation of the rapture. Only Paul. And that is why when you're talking about eschatology, the doctrine of future things, that if you don't study Paul, then you'll end up being an amillennialist. I don't want to get sidetracked on that. But if you study Paul, you'll end up being a pre-mill, pre-trib. So, that's because Paul was given special insight that the other guys weren't. He was just specially picked by God to know things. Okay, and there are 7 or 8 mysteries. Vine lists them. Please don't write this down, okay? But if you want it, it's in the book out there on the shelf. It's in Vine's Expository Dictionary of New Testament Words. Look under mystery and you'll find it. Right? But he defines a mystery as something that is known only to the initiated. And on the other side of that definition, a mystery is something that is not known to those who aren't privileged on the inside group. And that's what this chapter illustrates. Only the 12 disciples got this inside information. The whole masses got the parables, but only the disciples got the interpretation of the parables. And they got it in the house afterwards when Jesus went in and shut the doors. See? The initiated got the inside information. If you're a Christian tonight, you are indwelt by the Spirit of God, you are part of the initiated. You have a... I like to use the illustration of a radio. There's a radio in this machine right here. Okay? Now, it's a piece of garbage if the tuner's broken. But if the tuner's working, then it can receive the signals. Unsaved people are like radios without tuners. Right? They look just like people that have tuners. The Holy Spirit. See? But only Christians have the Holy Spirit so that they can receive the messages coming to us from God. An unsaved person, Isaac Asimov is a famous modern scientist. He's written commentaries on the Bible and they're hogwash. He's written a 3-volume commentary on the Bible. And he does not have the Holy Spirit living within him, therefore he is not able to actually receive the message that recorded in the Scripture by the Spirit of God. Because he doesn't have the Spirit of God. So on a mental level, he can understand it, but when it comes to anything that requires faith, he rejects it. And he tries to offer naturalistic explanation or just turns away from it in unbelief. So he just doesn't get it. See? But if you're a Christian, you've got the Spirit of God, all of a sudden, click, your tuner's on and you understand, you believe, you don't have a problem with the miraculous, everything else. Makes sense. So then, if you're a Christian, you are part of the initiated, and the mysteries then are no longer something you don't understand. You have the capability of understanding them, just like the disciples were privileged to be brought into the house and to be shown by the Master. Okay.
It's quite an honor.
It is.
If you realize what God is allowing us to do.
Yeah. Now, I'd like you to notice that Matthew and Luke called these things in this chapter, in these parables, mysteries, plural. There are a variety of details here that unsaved people aren't going to understand. Your neighbors don't understand these details right now. They don't believe them. Even if they've heard them, they don't believe them. It's not that they can't be intellectually acknowledged, but whether they can be spiritually assimilated. Let's look at the first one. There are 13 divisions in this chapter, and there are 8 parables, and only 4 of them are actually interpreted. Okay, now, that may seem confusing. How come there are 13 divisions if there are 8 parables? Well, you have 8 parables. 4 of those parables are interpreted. So, you understand? And the interpretation is wound right into a couple of them, so that they're not separate divisions. Okay? And so you have, for example, the first division is in verses 3 to 9, where Jesus gives the first parable. Would you take a moment and read verses 3 to 9 to yourself? That's the first division. It's the first parable. I'm just going to put this on pause and then we'll turn it on a minute. Okay. I would like you to summarize the parable for me. What's the first thing that happens in the parable?
Jesus sown the fell by the wayside. What the fowl came the Lord to them.
Okay. Second scenario. And what happened when the seed fell in the stones?
The seed sprang up because there wasn't much soil and it was very quickly and
Okay. What happened to it? Does it do anything else? Yeah, and it sort of wilted and withered away. Okay. The third scenario. In the thorns. Okay. And so what happened to it? Okay, it got choked out. All right. And the fourth scenario. In the good soil. And it brought forth fruit. And it brought forth fruit. Okay? Now, let's go and read together verses 18 to 23 in which Jesus gives the interpretation to the initiated, to the believers. Okay? What is the meaning that Jesus attaches to this first scenario here? Let's read together. Hear ye therefore the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and understands it not, then cometh the wicked one and catches away that which was sown in his heart. This is he which received seed by the wayside. And so what is this soil representing? Right? What's the word Jesus used for the wayside? The seed is, okay, let's back up. What is the seed? The seed is the Word of God, all right? These definitions are given by Jesus right here. Jesus says, does he not? The seed is the Word of God, doesn't he say that? Here it's the Word of the kingdom, all right? So the seed equals the Word of the kingdom. And so the seed is common to each one of these four pictures, right? And what does he say? How did this seed, in the picture it was a bird. What is the meaning of the bird? In this case the bird is the devil, right? And so the action then is the word of the kingdom being taken out of where? Out of the person's heart. So this represents the heart. See? So the wayside represents a heart where the word doesn't find the root. It just leaves. Have you ever seen a person like this? Everybody has. You know, we're surrounded by people who have hearts like the wayside, right? That it's not like they've never heard, but it's like you're talking to the wall, right? It's like it bounces off. It's like the seed went there and the bird came down, picked it up, it's gone. Right? It went in here, right? And one of those birds with long bills, and they pecked a hole in there, picked it up, and took it away. Okay? So is this not describing one kind of reaction to the preaching of the gospel? Is it not? This is scenario A. This is one kind of response to the preaching of the gospel that we see. All right, let's go to the next example. The next interpretation. But he that received the seed into stony places is the same as he that heareth the word, and anon with joy receiveth it, yet hath he not root in himself, but endureth for a while. For when tribulation or persecution ariseth because of the word, by and by he is offended. Okay, so response number 2, we still have the same seed, don't we? No bird in this situation, though. What do you have?
Stone.
Okay, and so the seed is in the stones. What happens to the seed here? What's the response?
So it's scorched by the sun, and the first response to that means that it doesn't, it won't stand any, there's no endurance.
Okay, I think that's actually number 2, or number 3. It's scorched, i.e., it doesn't last. Right? What was the first stage? Did the seed get taken away in this instance?
No, it was received.
Okay, so it was received. Now, I'm just going to let the language speak for itself. Okay, I want you to see it. You know, isn't receptivity a positive thing? Isn't that a positive response? Okay, so there is a positive response in the beginning. Then what happens? What's the difference between a stone and a seed? Okay, so there's yes, it was received with joy, right? So there's a immediate, instant, positive response. Is there a plant? Yeah, there is a plant. I don't know about you, but a plant is a living thing, is it not? Okay. There appears to be, it's a weakly rooted, but there is a plant. There appears to be life. Okay.
Yeah, short-lived.
There appears to be life. There's some first evidence of life, and then all of a sudden, things start to heat up. You ever tried to walk on the pavement in the middle of July with your bare feet? Stones get hot in the sun, right? Tribulation. We're talking about the seed. It's interesting. It endures for a while, but tribulation or persecution arises because of the word. It's because of this that these things get hot. Because of the word, you see? You see, it's because this is there that this other stuff that's there. And by the way, what did this represent in the first example? The wayside represented a heart. If the wayside represented a heart, does this not represent a heart too? It doesn't say so, but it's probably inferred that this is a stony heart, if you want to call it that. This is a wayside heart. This is a stony heart. It's something in the heart itself that produces the conflict. You see?
Is that as long as the word then it's okay to see if there's something that we don't want to live.
Right. Every one of us have all kinds of doors and compartments in our hearts, right? And in some of them we have rocks in our heads. We have rocks in our hearts, right? And then there's some little spots in our heart that are soft and tender to the Spirit of God, right? It's like the person that hears, and right off they see, this is it, this is for me, right? But all of a sudden they begin to understand with their real heart what this is going to mean. And so what's in there already, we're not talking about external persecution here, even though we have the words tribulation and trial, right?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, this is what's in the heart. Now that doesn't mean that this couldn't be referring to the result of external tribulation and trial, that's working on the inside of me too, and that, of course, then heats it up and dries it out and kills what little life is there. Okay. Now, notice that I did not say this person was saved. Right? I'm not saying this person was saved, nor am I saying the person is not saved. But there appears to be a positive response. I mean, what more could you desire than there to be a receptive spirit, right? With joy to the message of the gospel. And there appears to be life, but it's weakly rooted because there's other stuff down there that is in antithesis, in opposition to the seed of the word that's in the heart. You ever seen anybody like this? Maybe you went through it yourself, right? Most people do. Most believers do. It's unusual for a person not to struggle with the gospel when shortly after you've been receptive to it, all of a sudden the reality hits home. Oh no. See? And there's a conflict between this, which is of God, and this, right, which is there's no life to these things. This is death resident within, right? That's fighting against the spirit, right? Okay, and this next thing, let's read it. He that also that received seed among the thorns, picture 3, is he that heareth the word, and the care of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, choke the word, and he becometh unfruitful. Notice that it's not the world. This isn't the world. We're talking about a person's heart. This is what's going on inside of a person. A care is something you carry. It's the world's care. It's the world's anxiety that I carry inside my heart. That any person carries within. Right? Now, cares are in a sense the opposite of a stone. Because you can feed a care and it'll grow. Right? You can feed an anxiety and it'll grow. It's like a living thing. It's like a cancer in my heart, right? That if I let it, it'll just take control and I'll become completely phobic. You know what I mean? Have you ever met a person that fed cares, that fed the anxieties, or whatever? I just want you to see that it's so easy for us to read something like this and then jump to a quick conclusion. Read it carefully. Look at the language. Right? Let it speak for itself. This is the cares of the world. It's not the world itself. It's not all that stuff out there that chokes it out. It's my response to that stuff out there. It's what's in my heart or in a person's heart. The person's response to this as well as that. And that has the potential of, if I feed it, it'll grow. Right? And it'll choke out. It has the same end result, exactly the same end result, right? This wilts for lack of root, and this is choked. The life is choked out of it by other things that are given more life. Have you ever? This is exactly what happens to my garden every summer. I plant the carrot seed there, right? And I don't have to plant the other stuff. It's just there already, right? And that little carrot, a little spindly little thing, it'll grow up there. But by the time it gets 3 inches tall, the stuff around it is way up here, right? And they're this thick, right? And you know as well as I that that root, is only going to get so much water when there's competition like this for the same moisture, right? And so it's going to suck the life out of this thing here, and this thing is going to get so big that it's going to strangle this thing. We're not talking about something that's dead. We're talking about something that's so alive it's dangerous to the life that's there already. See? I don't know. There's a different picture here. There is stuff that is that is deadening to the seed of the gospel in a person's heart, that can have a negative effect on it. And there is that in our hearts which is not so much deadening as it is choking, that that we can feed it, that the world feeds, and that if I respond to that which is in the world, then it'll just. I'm not quite sure. I wish, Ken, do you have any? Can you perceive a further difference between these two?
Not really.
It's fruitful grounds for meditating on, because maybe there is something more that can be said about that.
I just heard about the last phrase here in verse 22, and he becomes unfruitful. Can you explain that?
Well, the potential is there when there's a plant for it to have fruit, right? And it doesn't say that the other one even gets close, right? So maybe this is the death in the person's heart, the deadening things in a person's heart here wilt this first response very quickly, whereas this one lasts longer, perhaps. You see? And then it has the potential, it gets really close to fruit bearing, but then it gets choked out in the end. So this one seems to last longer, maybe. Okay? Because the person hasn't made the necessary choices to feed the right thing, to water the right thing. Okay? Right? And so there appears to be life here, there appears to be life here, but it doesn't come to full maturity. This appears to be even less mature than this one. Yeah.
I think the third one might have born fruit, and then until 60, you get 5,000
That's entirely possible too.
I think the third one might be. I think we might see a lot of the third one. We might recognize the third thing happening with people where they really start to come to church and they have an interest in whatnot, and then the things of the world eventually take precedent over that what they got from church, and that precedent grows rather than the other direction. It's like the weed, because the worldly part is drawing in the other direction, it grows faster, and they have more exposure to it. It just slowly takes over, and eventually the other part, they just don't come back.
Yes, I think it's a commentary on our mind, isn't it? The deceitfulness of riches. Deceitfulness is something that happens in the mind. Right? Its effect is on the mind. Is it not? I am deceived where? Not in my foot. In my mind. You see? And so it's something that happens in my mind, and it's anxiety, right? Care and anxiety is something else that happens in my mind. You see? And so when my thinking is twisted and when it's diverted, both of those things have the same effect. They work together to squeeze the life out of and the productivity out of a Christian, I think, out of somebody who has life. Okay? I really, for many years, I've wrestled over this parable, and for a long time I thought it was an either-or situation, that all of these people were unsaved and this person was the only saved person. But because this is talking about a heart, and because there's life here, and because there's life here, and because there's life here, and there's thwarted fruitfulness here, and effective fruitfulness here, then that changes the picture here a little bit. In my understanding, I think we're given different pictures of responses, only one of which is the ultimate desire. God warns us against all of these, whether it be unsaved or saved. Sure. I think just because it says there is a seed that produces life here is good evidence that we're talking about a saved person. But it's the kind of person that maybe gets saved, at a meeting or something, and then there's just too much else down there.
I read it about 3 times here, and you just said the word again. That was weird.
I've read it for many weeks.
And last but not least, but in contrast to all these negatives, he that receives seed into the good ground is he that heareth the word. Now he's getting it plainer and plainer. The Lord he's talking about people here. This is one kind of a person, this is another kind of a person, this is another kind of a person, this is a kind of a heart. See? He that receives seed is the good ground is he that hears the word and understands it, which bears fruit and bringeth forth some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Not all of us are going to bear the same amount of fruit as Christians, but the whole objective is that we do bear fruit. Right? That's God's desire in our life. If we bear some fruit, John chapter 15 says that God, who is the vine dresser, Jesus said, my Father is the vine dresser, right? If we bear fruit, He prunes us so that we would bring forth more fruit. Right? He cuts off the superfluous stuff, the stuff that's unnecessary, right? So that we become even more fruitful. Right? And God's desire, John chapter 15, is that we bear much fruit. We have the same three. There's a 30, 60, and 100-fold here. In John 15, we have some, more, and much.
And you just expand on the fruit a little bit, like what else the fruit is that we consider exactly. Just understand, I'd like to understand it better.
Yeah, what is it? Carpology? Karpos is the Greek word for fruit, I think. So the doctrine of fruit, fruit bearing would be carpology. The Bible's doctrine of fruit bearing includes such things as the fruit of the Spirit. Is the graces that the Spirit of God works in every believer. If you have the Spirit of God, He's working within you. Regardless of who we are, right? Love and joy and peace and long-suffering and gentleness and goodness and faith and meekness and self-control and all of these things. Then there is fruit that is defined as works that we do, right? So bringing forth fruit, right, is soul winning is described that way. Being fruitful. I think it's first or second Peter describes it that way. That if you add to your faith diligently and you keep adding these things, these Christian virtues in your experience, so that you produce action instead of just hear, right? Then you become neither blind nor unfruitful in your knowledge of God.
Jason has a question on this, and I'm trying to really. I'm getting a really good answer.
Well, Hebrews 13 describes praise as being the fruit of our lips.
Because you look at types of fruit, like a balance of the spirit, or the actual soul, or how you act.
Right. Yes. Our religious service can be described as fruit. Okay? One of the privileges, like it's different. What we're doing is mixing analogies here. One analogy, one picture of Christians is that we are priests. In a priesthood, we're all a priesthood. You're a priest, I'm a priest, you're a priest, right? And so we get to offer up our bodies a living sacrifice to God. We are not just priests, but we are the sacrifices too. So our body is our own sacrifice. So we offer as priests our own body as a sacrifice, and that and another job of a priest was to sing. The Levites and the priesthood sang all the time in the Old Testament, and that is described as fruit in Hebrews 13. Get a concordance out and run fruit.
Okay, yeah.
And you'll find it. It's all over the place. All right, so wrapping this up then, I think the first parable is given by Christ here to describe for us The varying visible reactions. This is all visible stuff here, right? I don't know what's going on in my Jiffy pots at home, down like underneath the surface. I don't know if those seeds that I planted 3 weeks ago are germinating or not. Some of them I can tell because I've got shoots 2 inches high out of some of them, right? That's visible. See? Only God knows what's really true down here, you know. But what Jesus is describing is what is evident to everybody. Either there's no plant there, it's just like the pavement. There's nothing growing there. We can see it. We can look at people and we can say there's nothing growing there. We can look at other people and say there's something growing there, right? And we are pretty good judges too, given the circumstances of whether it's this or this sometimes, right? And it's really evident when somebody's doing that. Right? So these are visible responses to the preaching of the gospel during the inter-Advent age. It was true in the first Jerusalem church, and this reality is still true today in 1995 AD, and it's going to be true during the tribulation. All during the inter-Advent period, this is a reality. It's something that it's never been described this way in the Scripture before until Jesus gave it to his disciples there. So therefore, it's a mystery. And this is an insight into spiritual things that we believers are privileged to have. This is not telling us that there are two kinds of people, saved and unsaved. No, that's not the point of this parable at all. It's describing 4 distinct responses to the preaching of the Word of God. All right. Okay, it's break time, coffee time. We'll come back and we'll look at parable number 2. All right, so we have looked at the first 3 divisions then of this chapter. Chapter 13, verses 3 to 9 is the parable of the sower and the seed and the 4 soils illustrated. Verses 10 to 17, the explanation for the parabolic teaching. That's the second division. The third division is 18 to 23, the parable of the soil, the 4 soils interpreted. I just put them basically together under that heading. And the fourth division is verses 24 to 30, the parable of the tares and the wheat. 24 to 30. So the illustration or the parable is given in 24 to 30, and the interpretation is given in verses 34 to 43. Now, I don't know why it wasn't done real nice in order, but anyway, we do have it. This is the tares and the wheat. So would you take a moment and read this first section to yourself, please, and familiarize yourself with the details, and then we'll come back and we'll take it up in a minute. Okay, let's summarize the details of this parable. Who are the characters here? Who are the main characters in this parable? Okay, it just calls it, we haven't got to the interpretation yet, okay? Right? So we have a man and his enemy, and the man's enemy. Okay? And it appears as if the seed, the good seed, is people. Thought something was happening in someone's stomach over in that direction. All right. So there is that which is called good seed, and that which is what is it? How is it described? Tares. Okay. And who else is mentioned here? The servants come and talk to the man and ask if they want him to do something. Pardon?
Some kind of food. Verse 25.
Okay, and while men slept, right? So we have.
I don't know who they are.
Okay, so we have sleeping men. All right, and then finally, there's one more. Does it mention the angels there? The reapers. Okay. Okay, now the next question we want to answer is when? Is there any time elements involved here? Let me start you off, okay? There's a time of sowing. It starts out with them going out, right? A man sowed his field, so that's seed time, if you wish. All right? Any other time references?
Then the tares was.
Okay, so there's a seeding time, and then it appears as if after there's while men slept. There is there's another seed time, right? An evil seeding. And then what did you say? There's a right. When the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, and so there is the growth time. And there's a growth time in which both the good seed and the bad seed are supposed to be let grow together. And so let both grow together until the harvest. Right? So a growth time up until, now this is common sense, isn't it? Right? We all know this is what gardens do. There's no weeding time. No weeding. Growth time up until harvest, and then the thing ends with and then this is my kind of a garden. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather. Okay, and then there's a harvest time, in which first there is a gathering, and a separation, and a burning. See? Yeah, and an ingathering. Okay. I suppose that almost tells the story, doesn't it? Just by asking two questions: who's involved in this, and when. I suppose if you ask what, that would fill it out. Does anybody have any questions about that? The harvest has different aspects. There's a gathering together, there's a separation, and a burning, and an ingathering. And it appears to be in that order. Okay? Right? Now, let's go to the interpretation of verses 34 to 43. All these things spake Jesus to the multitude in parables. Let's skip down to verse 36. Then Jesus sent the multitude away and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, Declare to us the parable of the tares of the field. He answered and said unto them, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. Who is the Son of Man? Christ. So Christ is the man, or the Son of Man. The field is the world. Right? So we're talking about the whole world of humanity. Right? The good seed of the children of the kingdom. Right? So let's just put believers for short. The children of the kingdom. Right? These are mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. So we're talking about spiritually adept people. The tares are the children of the wicked. What would be a good word for them? Children of Satan, the children of the wicked, unbelievers. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. Can't get much plainer than that. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. Okay, so and harvest time equals the end of time. If this is the end of time, what is the seed time? Right? The beginning starting with how far back are we allowed to go in this picture? Yeah, you can't go any further back than Christ because he's the one who's doing the sowing. Okay? So from the first advent of Christ during his public ministry, this thing holds true, right? On and to the end of the time, right? Which is described here in some detail. So the seed time therefore relates to Christ, the time of Christ's message, right? Christ and the apostles' message. We're talking about the gospel in the book of Acts, right? The beginning of the New Testament. All right? Okay. The harvest is the end of the world, the reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, the reapers, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend and them which do iniquity. All right? And so, first there's going to be the gathering of the wicked. Stage one. The wicked are going to be gathered. Now, it's interesting to parallel this with other teachings. Okay? If you go to the Olivet Discourse, same thing. Remember? Now, some people have got this really mixed up. There was a song that was popularized a few years ago when I was a teenager. I wish we'd all been ready. Two men walking up the hill, one disappeared, the other left standing still. I wish we'd all been ready. Man and wife asleep in bed, she hears a noise, she turns her head, he's gone. I wish we'd all been ready. There's no time to change your mind, the sun has come and you've been left behind. Something to that effect. Okay? And so that song was taken out of Matthew chapter 24 in the Olivet Discourse, and it was taken to describe the rapture. That was the theme song for A Thief in the Night, that movie. It was a major movie production that dominated the Christian scene for years. And so everybody's got it in their head that Matthew 24 describes the rapture, where Christ sends his angels to get the believers and take them out. But in reality, in Matthew 24, we're talking about the second advent, not the rapture. Christ comes in judgment. He first gathers the wicked out, see, and those that are left are then blessed with rewards and taken into the kingdom. See, the same thing in Matthew chapter 25. First you have the gathering of the goats on Christ's left hand, the left hand, and they are judged. See, and then the sheep are gathered and blessed on his right. Okay, we see a similar thing in some of these other parables later on in the chapter here. The draught of the fish is the same thing. And you always have the negative is taken out first. Right? You don't do this. I mean, nobody does this, I don't think. Well, I don't know. I suppose there are always exceptions, but most people, when they do their harvesting in the fall, they don't. They just don't go through and just pick everything, right? And then pick the good stuff out of the bad stuff, do they? Right? There's a weeding process. Right? Remember, this is in response to the servant's question. Shall we go pull the weeds? Shall we? And he says, no, let them both go together until the end. Then you can pull the weeds. So they pull the weeds first. They gather the weeds first. See? And in the process of the gathering of the weeds, there's a separation. And then these weeds that are gathered that burn, there's judgment. Have I got ahead of myself? Yeah. All things that offend are gathered, verse 41. And verse 42, they are cast into, the angels shall cast them into a furnace of fire, and there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. And then, last stage, the righteous shall shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. This takes us right up to the kingdom. The righteous are gathered into the kingdom. And this takes us up to the establishment of the kingdom at the second advent. So this spans the situation, the real spiritual situation that's happening right now, that has happened since Christ came on the scene and started preaching. Right? Until he comes back again, sits at his kingdom. That this situation is true, that God produces true believers, that Christ produces true believers today, as he did 2,000 years ago, as he is going to into the future, prior to his coming, up even through the tribulation. Satan produces false counterfeits. Satan comes and sows the tares. Right? And he's responsible for, Ephesians 2, 1 and 2. You who were once dead in trespasses and sins, yet now is he quickened, who once walked according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now inworks in the children of disobedience. See? Paul's commentary fits Jesus' parable perfectly. Right? Christ is sowing his seed. It's like the old picture. Some of you haven't studied this, but the Bible teaches that God has a divine program, that he selected you to be saved before you were even born. And me, and there are lots of people who haven't been born yet who are elect in the mind of God, chosen in eternity past. Right? And so when Christ came, and when he continues to come in a spiritual sense, he picks the elect out and saves them. And the devil is very busy counterfeiting this. Right? And so this is the way it is. It has been and will be. True and false people are difficult to distinguish right now. Isn't it amazing that there are real strawberry plants in the garden and there are look-alike strawberry plants? There is rhubarb and there is fake rhubarb. They seem to grow in the same patch. There are carrots, and in my carrot rows there are dummy carrots. There are weeds that look like carrots. They only grow in the carrot rows. Isn't it amazing? It's just the way it is. Oh yeah. And so the true and the false grow together, and they're difficult to distinguish at first, but eventually their fruits show. As time progresses, in every generation, as people mature, as the righteous, as believers mature, and as unbelievers mature, sooner or later it shows what you really are. Can't hide it forever. Time is a great tester.
I'll recommend that sleep.
Wow.
The church is the key. The different places they are.
Yeah, I don't know. He never interprets that. I think it's also possible that that's just sort of an allusion to the fact that, not to the fact that there are men that we need to identify, but the fact that it's done in deception. You know, behind the scenes, out of sight. You know, the devil tries to do everything in a hidden. He's got a hidden agenda. What Christ does, he does openly. You know, what the devil does is always behind deceptive, so forth. Okay. Another thing that comes out of this is that the true and the false continue to coexist. The wicked will be separated and judged in the end, and the righteous will be blessed and honored. Right? So the tares and the wheat parable shows us that that there are in effect only two classes of people, in spite of the fact that there are four responses to the gospel. There are only two classes. Yeah, the end result is that there are only believers and unbelievers, and they're going to coexist through time until the end, when the Lord is going to separate. Okay. And that these two classes are sometimes not visibly distinguishable. You can't tell by looking at people necessarily into which class they are. Right? It takes time. And I think that as between the first advent of Christ and his second advent, that as we continue to get closer to this time, that the more sharp will be the contrast between the tares and the wheat. I think the book of Revelation plainly teaches that evil is going to increase exponentially. You know? Paul said as much in 2 Timothy chapter 3. This know that in the last days perilous times shall come. And the tribulation is going to be a time of trouble such as there never was on the earth, nor ever again shall be. You know? There's never going to be as bad evil as there will be at the end. And at the same time, God is going to increase the number of the righteous. It's going to be, it's just going to be a sharp dividing. And we are seeing it. When I was a kid, most people lived in our society by a Christian lifestyle, pretty much. You know, our society had Christian social mores, right? And in 25 years or 30 years, hey, that changed in a hurry. You know? Well, we have 15 minutes. I think we might be able to do one more. Oh yes, yes. All right, the next parable is a short one, the parable of the mustard seed, in verses 31 and 32. We are not given an interpretation of this parable. So put your thinking caps on. Another parable put he forth to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs, and becometh a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. Now, before you all give me your opinions, let's stop and talk about rules of interpretation for a minute. Okay? This is really important. This is probably one of the more valuable things that have come out of this lesson tonight. Since we aren't given a specific interpretation, what's a good rule to follow?
Anything else in the Bible has the same subject.
Okay, so anything else similar in the Bible should be consulted, right? And by the way, that's one of the ways that we come up with a partial interpretation of this verse. Because that second verse there, in verse 32, it talks about the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. Doesn't that remind any of you scholars of anything you've already taken this year? Daniel. The book of Daniel. Do you remember where in the book of Daniel? Chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. Right? Remember, it was a great tree, grew up to heaven, and it was so big and so huge that the fowls of the air came and they lodged in its branches and they were nourished in its fruits. And all of a sudden it was cut down. Right? And some men came and cut it down. And they put a band around the tree, stump. I think if I got the story right. And that really upset poor old Nebuchadnezzar. He lost sleep over that. And so he called Daniel in, and Daniel gave him the explanation. And what was Daniel's interpretation? In that particular instance, the tree was Nebuchadnezzar himself, representative of the whole Babylonian Empire, which became so great that Nebuchadnezzar, representative of the Babylonians, became such a powerful empire that he was nourishing the peoples of the world. The whole world came to Babylon. You know, 7 wonders of the world. One of the 7 wonders of the world was the Hanging Gardens in Babylon. Babylon provided what people the world needed, if you wish. That was like the birds of the air. Right? But then Nebuchadnezzar himself is cut down, right, for a space of time, and then he was reinstated, you see, showing that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men. So it wasn't just Babylon that provided nourishment for the birds of the air, but it was really God using Nebuchadnezzar and sovereignly dictating how things would happen so that people would get blessed or nourished by the people that God chose. Okay, so that's what you take out of the book of Daniel for this thing. Right? Remember, there was another thing in the book of Daniel. It talked about birds being nourished. There was another one, another event. I think it mentions the birds of the air came and they what? That was in short-term memory too, was it? Remember Daniel was, no, it was not Daniel. No, sorry, it was Joseph. It wasn't Daniel, it was Joseph. In the book of Genesis. Remember Joseph was put in prison? And the baker and there was a baker and the cupbearer. The king's baker and the king's cupbearer were thrown into jail where he was. And they both had dreams. And see, what was it? The cupbearer, he was restored. Wasn't it? I think so. Yeah. And when he left, Joseph said, "Oh, be sure and tell the king that I'm down here and I don't deserve to be down here," whatever. And so when the baker saw that such a wonderful outcome happened as a result of Daniel's interpretation of the cupbearer's dream, then he said, "Well, I had a dream too." He says, "Remember, I was going along and I had a great big basket full of all kinds of breads and everything, and the birds of the air came and ate the bread out of the basket, and they were nourished." Only that time, that was symbolic that he was going to lose his head. Right? He was killed. Right? So it was evidence of divine judgment, the sovereignty of God again. Setting in place who he will. Okay. That's one. That's one thing that you need to take into account. And again, maybe it ought to be said that it's different. A rule that, number one rule is that don't be too dogmatic. about stuff that isn't clearly revealed to us. Right? We are not given interpretation of this particular parable, so we ought to be a little careful about being dogmatic. Right? Right? Secondly, use the rest of the Bible. Use the general context of the Bible. What's an even better rule? Okay. Right. That kind of goes without saying. Right. When we're interpreting, hopefully we're not bringing our ideas, but rather we're trying to discover what's there. Right. That's the difference between eisegesis and exegesis, or deduction, where I go with a preconceived idea to try to discover it. You know, try to discover my idea there and support it, or going there with an open mind and trying to induction, discovering the details from the facts, then drawing my conclusion. That's another rule that we follow in interpretation. Yeah, the immediate context. Yeah. The immediate context. Now it doesn't tell us who this man was. The kingdom of heaven like to a grain of mustard seed which a man took and sowed in his field. What was the last man mentioned that sowed something in his field? Christ. In the immediate context, that wouldn't be a bad place to start, would it? I think that's a fair place to start, even though we're not real certain. Okay. Okay. And what's another thing you have to do when you're interpreting the Bible? Have you ever seen a mustard seed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever, I've never seen a mustard tree. Have you ever seen a mustard tree? So maybe we ought to do a little historical, cultural research. Right? Wouldn't hurt to find out about mustards, mustard seeds, mustard trees. How long does it take? Do they grow up like a banana tree in 3 years to produce their fruit or whatever? Yeah. Do you know? Does anybody here have any idea how long it takes a mustard seed to grow into a full blooming tree? Well, seeing as how a mustard seed is about that big right there, I would say it probably takes a long time. Is that right? Okay, so anyway, cultural, historical research, background study. These are all important aspects, and these are all necessary to come up with a definition here of the interpretation. We're still talking about the kingdom of heaven. In the last two parables, the sower and the soils is talking about 4 spiritual responses that people had to Christ's message during a long period of time. Right? This second parable is describing 2 classes of people that coexist during this kingdom over this vast period of time. Right? So it still uses the same terminology here. We're still talking about this vast period of time. Yeah? And this has some other spiritual connotation to add to it. So we derive that from immediate context. A grain of mustard seed growing into a huge, when it is grown, is the greatest among herbs and becomes a tree. I would hazard a guess that one thing that we're being told here is that we're looking at a long period of time. Right? That's something that Christ does here. Christ sows a seed in his field, and it takes forever, it seems. It takes a long time for it to come to maturity. Okay? It's very small to begin with, and it becomes vast in the end. Okay?
I think that it could probably be speaking, it may be alluding to the church itself.
Maybe?
That by the end there are millions of people who will be members of.
You can't get much smaller than one, can you? Acts chapter 2, the beginning of the age, the beginning of this kingdom, right? The inter-advent period. Started with one church where? Jerusalem. It's the first local church. Right? Yep. James and Peter and the apostles, right? Would you hazard a guess how many churches there are today? How many local churches there might be in existence today around the world? We're just about to the top of the mustard tree, wouldn't you think? Yeah. Like, I mean, if we had to try to discover an analogy that fits the general context, we're talking about the same period of time, something that starts out so small and grows to something so vast. Right? Which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when it is grown is the greatest among herbs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. Now, it's kind of interesting, because at the end of the tribulation period, the birds of the air are mentioned again in the book of Revelation. In the 20th chapter, Armageddon, at the end of the tribulation, yeah, the birds of the air come, the fowls of the air come, and they eat. They eat the bodies of the wicked dead that are destroyed as a result of divine judgment. Right now, that's on the analogy of this thing here. Remember back in Genesis, the old baker. The birds came and ate the bread. That was a bad thing. That was bad, not good. See? But in the book of Daniel, when the birds came and ate off the tree, that was a good thing. That was describing the positive benefits that came. Maybe both are in view here. I'm not being dogmatic, but there are positive and negative results of the church's growth in the history. And in the end, the positive thing is that the church is going to have a profound effect on the world at the end of the age. The church, we are the salt of the earth. Guess what the world is going to be like when the church is removed? Everybody want to hazard a guess? That's what's going to precipitate the worst experience of human history ever. And so there is no question that the growth, the magnified growth of the church at the end of the inter-advent age, just prior, 7 years in fact, prior to the second advent of Christ, is going to have profound positive results, like, as if you're feeding all positive things into society, like the birds of the air feed on the blossoms and the fruits of the tree. But the negative thing is that in judgment, the birds of the air are going to eat the bodies of the wicked in the end too, just to the end. Now I don't know. I haven't actually read a commentary on this. I enjoy doing it on my own. Right? Now I don't know what Kyle says about this stuff. Have you read? Has anybody read what he says about it? Is it Ryle? Sorry. You don't remember that guy's name. Ken, surely you must have read something on this or heard something about it or preached on it. Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Please. I know I'm not giving you the be-all and the end-all on this stuff. I would suggest, at the very least, that the parable of the mustard seed describes the increase of righteousness throughout the inter-advent period. Right? It may even be showing the growth of the church. Although I would tend those two things happen in parallel. I don't think the image here is so much a picture of the church